Dubuque, Iowa, a masterpiece on the Mississippi River, a city known for its rich architecture and historic buildings. Over the past 10 years, Dubuque has done a phenomenal job of restoring their historic buildings to their former glory. Today, let's take an inside look at how Dubuque has taken two of its finest buildings, restoring them with historic charm and technology upgrades, today on If These Walls Could Talk. The epicenter of many American cities is, of course, City Hall. People run in and out of this building all day long to visit city offices, meet with their city council members, and it's hard to imagine in Dubuque this building being used for anything differently. But in fact, it was. The building was built in 1857 and was once home to a bowling alley, a farmer's market, and even a shooting range. Can you imagine that? A shooting range? My, how things have changed. Formal documents. Well, there are a lot of them at City Hall, as forms are filled and people line up to pay bills right here on the first floor. It's hard to imagine over 150 years ago, something very different was roaming this floor.
To us, that would be very strange having livestock in City Hall.
That's right. Inside City Hall, the animals were part of an indoor farmer's market.
So if you look at the structure of City Hall and the exterior of it, the tall windows that you see, particularly on the first floor, were actually doors where wagons could be backed up to those doors and produce and even livestock would be unloaded into the first floor.
Those wagons backed up to a 22-inch wide market stall equipped with a gas outlet and stove. City Hall was constructed by architect John Rogue in a Bostonian style, modeled after the marketplaces in the Northeast. The hall's signature features include towering windows and thin, tall physique.
It would have been a very tall building for its time because of the 3 floors and the higher floors, as we've talked about with that sort of Bostonian architecture. And I think because the town itself, there might not have been a lot of affluence to build huge buildings or bigger homes. It was a very tight community and concentrated to the downtown area. So it just simply by its physical presence would have stood out.
But hidden away from plain view, down under the ground is one of the most interesting parts of the hall. On its lowest level lied the Dubuque Police Department's jail, along with 2 well-known taverns.
I can't help but think that the people that perhaps patronized those taverns were very well behaved, because they didn't have to go far to be, put in jail if they needed to be.
Now, the second floor doesn't have nearly the same character as the basement, but it used to be home to a courtroom, council chambers, and the city's main offices. Today, it's still city offices. Like the Dubuque Sustainability Coordinator and Economic Development, they are both right here. At the top of the building on the 3rd floor, a bunch of boxes are scattered around, as a tale of old dancing feet can still be heard on these worn-out floors. This storage room used to be a community center, where galas and town meetings were often held.
I think it would have been kind of glamorous at the time to go up the staircase, because as you went up, the staircase got a little more detailed and somewhat finer in its manufacturing, the woodwork and the stair rails and things like that.
One time when it wasn't filled with the boxes and the storage and all that, you can see where they used it for target practice, because the police were in this building and they do need to have target practice for their shooting abilities. And there was the bowling alley, and you could see some of the old floors were worn, and I believe archery. So that was a variety of uses that perhaps weren't what you would normally consider city government.
But tucked away on the 3rd floor is another of the hall's hidden treasures.
In the cupola, and there's windows in that. At one time, I believe they had people watching for fires, because of course a fire at that time was very dangerous.
But as times changed, so did the building. The 1st floor was ripped up in 1879 when the area was converted to office space. This came after the farmer's market was moved to the outside of the building, spanning more than 16 blocks, where it can still be found today.
That's why this building was sort of built the way it is and why it has the space around it physically, the streets and whatnot, kind of that wide berth in order to accommodate all the people that wanted to come and shop at farmers markets.
The building would light up when electricity was installed in 1921. since gas lighting was becoming just too expensive, nearly $140 a month. In 1926, the first floor's massive windows were replaced with smaller ones, and the inside brick walls were covered up with plaster.
They did keep the same look to it, which again, in a historic building, that is imperative that you keep the outside to look pretty much the same.
But the most noticeable renovation came in 1954, when one of the building's prominent features was removed, the wooden bell tower. First placed into the tower in 1858, hung a 2,800-pound bell at a cost of just over $1,300. The clanging of the bell could be heard daily as it rang to signify the hours of the day, and alerted young adults of the 9 p.m. curfew. It was also rung on special occasions, with the ending of major military wars and welcoming home of returning heroes. As fires blazed through the city of Dubuque, it was also used to alert firemen to blazes in the city, striking the bell 1 to 5 times for each of the city's 5 wards.
There is a little space on the eastern side of the building that has a little window and access to the bell tower, and that would have been the fire watch because they would have had a complete unobstructed view of a good portion of the city.
The 1.5-ton bell would sit silent in front of City Hall for years. In the 1980s, a citizen group sought to restore the original bell tower, so they began raising funds to do just that.
Decided they would raise personal monies to build an aluminum tower and restructure that. But they raised $100,000.
That replica bell tower was placed on the east side of the building in 1990, and that old original bell is now safely tucked away inside.
I think a bell tower provides a piece of whimsy that otherwise perhaps wouldn't be there, and it adds perhaps a bit of romance to this utilitarian building.
Today, sitting comfortably on the corner of 13th and Iowa Street is a building full of stories, Dubuque's City Hall. Walking in downtown Dubuque, you'll see historic building renovations nearly everywhere you look, and this building is no exception. The Dubuque Fire Engine House No. 1 was built back in 1883. Prior to then, Dubuque had only maintained a volunteer fire department, so Engine House No. 1 was home to the first paid staff, even if they were only part-time. For nearly a century, they would eat, sleep, and of course work from right here until the engine house closed in the late 1970s. But today, the newly renovated building is back in use, home to some of Dubuque's nonprofit agencies. Take a listen. The place is abuzz with the sounds of children singing and dancing. That's Dubuque's Head Start program for pre-kindergarten kids. Dubuque's engine house, built with its curved windows and doors, is a beautiful building, but it wasn't built with that in mind.
There was no particular architecture like Greek or Roman or Queen Anne or whatever. It was brick and mortar, large doors to get the horses and the apparatus in and out.
The building was built by self-trained architect Frodlin Joseph Herr. As the north end of Dubuque continued to develop in the early 1880s, so did the smoky fires of the area. Before Engine House No. 1, Dubuque's fire department was scattered all across the city, with only a hose cart near the future engine house location.
By 1883, even prior to that, there was talk about building an engine house to protect the north end and the point area of Dubuque. Problem always was money. Dubuque was a major center for the processing of logs, and there were some of Dubuque's major fires starting in 1894. So if the fire bell rang, firemen would run to the engine house, get the engine ready to come out. Other volunteers would go to a local business that had agreed to let them have the horses. So we had a little time element here. Get the horses back and hook them up to the engine, pull the engine to the fire.
Until the city realized they were wasting time.
The city said, you know, this isn't very efficient, this isn't working, we better buy some of our own horses. Hey, that was great, everybody was happy. We're gonna get our own horses, we're not having to run around. Problem was, some councilman came up with the brilliant idea, Well, you know, a lot of times those horses are just sitting at the engine house. We can make some money. Let's rent out our horses. So they'd rent out the fire horses, and they were back to chasing down a horse that pulled the fire engine.
In 1867, Dubuque's first steam engine, the J.K. Graves, was bought. That engine was moved to Engine House Number 1 in 1884. The simplicity of the engine house allowed fast construction, taking only 4 months from September to December to complete. Its commercial looks, although simple, displays complex brickwork seen in many buildings in the 1880s.
Basically what the contract was, you built 4 walls. You had a wood floor on first floor, a wood floor on second floor, nothing on second floor.
See these lockers? That's where fire apparatuses and horse stalls used to be, right here on the engine house floor. If you continue up the wooden staircase, you'll find a health center, a previous home sweet home to the firemen.
The men were on duty 24 hours a day. They got to go home for 1 hour in the morning for breakfast, 1 hour at noon for lunch, and 1 hour in the evening for their evening meal. Otherwise, they lived at the engine house.
This engine house would become the first headquarters for the Dubuque Fire Department.
And the chief moved in down there, and it became the permanent fire headquarters.
Renovations in 1952. By 1972, those curved windows and stall doors were straight and more modern, removing the building's historic charm.
The building was gutted and totally renovated. That remained that way until roughly 1983, when the engine house out on 32nd and Central was constructed.
That new firehouse marked the end of Engine House Number 1.
After 1983, the city used the building for various functions, and over the years with the remodeling, the facade was nothing like what it was originally.
That empty fire station would house the Dubuque Housing Department for nearly 30 years. In 2012, the building was once again remodeled, this time to bring back its historic charm from the 1880s, including the installation of a reclaimed brass fire pole and a rooftop bell, salvaged from a 19th century schoolyard.
What you see today, as far as the exterior goes, and putting the bell tower back on the roof, you basically see what that looked like in 1884.
Tucked neatly into the bend on Central Avenue sits a building, now a classroom to some and history lesson to all. It's hard to find another city with the historic charm of Dubuque. Join us next time as we explore a historic bed and breakfast and an opera house. For If These Walls Could Talk, I'm John Sutter.